welcome everybody. Welcome to Brio Bites, a podcast focused on tech topics, covering tech for good, IT security and software engineering. Today, we're joined by Yemi. How are you today, Yemi?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Hopefully not being caught in the storms today, which are battering Britain for the 10th time this winter.
Yeah, I'm quite lucky. I'm in the southeast. It's not too bad where I am, but of course, I've been watching the news as well.
Yeah, you can tell by my accent. I'm up north. So just to give a bit of an overview to Yemi, so Yemi has an extensive career in software engineering and leadership with over 15 years at this level. Yemi has managed engineering, mobile and distributed teams across the globe and industries, including manufacturing, e-commerce, retail, healthcare, SaaS. You've really got the T-shirt, haven't you, Yemi?
I seem to have. I won't say it was by design, but I've been lucky in my career that I've been able to do mostly what I wanted to do so far.
Oh, that's amazing. So I'm really excited about today. So we're going to be covering off some critical areas around software engineering leadership. They're probably podcasts on their own, but we'll see how far we get. But we're going to be looking at people, process, and delivery. Obviously, I'm a recruiter at Brio Digital, so let's start with people. So I think we're going to cover off looking at kind of assessing your teams, etc., recruitment and diversity, which is one of the most, and rightly so, important topics in recruitment right now, and how we can build better products with a more diverse workforce. So when looking at people, I suppose a good starting point for any engineering manager, Yemi, would be, if you're starting a new role, or maybe just having a view, is assessing your current team.
Yes.
As a leader. How would you do that? Where would you start, Yemi?
One of a really good tool that you could use to actually assess your current team will be something called a skills and will matrix. So you try to understand the skills of the team from a technical perspective, and also then understand as it says, the will. What are they looking to do? Are they looking to progress? Are they really happy in what they're doing right now? Are they demotivated? Those kind of things. That is a really powerful tool to leverage, because that will quickly show you skill set of your team and where they are in terms of any kind of change management that you may need to do.
Right. Okay. Is that a long process, Yemi, or is it something that you can do quite quickly? Would you work with the engineers?
Oh yeah, it's something you can do quite quickly. I think you can gather a lot of that information partly from your one-to-ones with the engineers, and partly we just trying to get feedback from other people, and then you can then pull all of that together yourself, or like in a group, depending on the size of team that you lead.
Yeah. Would you work with HR with that as well? Just kind of looking at career plans and next steps for individuals?
I think that would be kind of next steps. So that initial one is just really to know where you're at in terms of being able to really think of two things. How do you guide that team? How do you help them to grow? And then the second thing is how is this key team capable of delivering?
Right. Okay. And then would you look at training needs then as well for individuals? And
absolutely, all of these kind of reveal those kind of gaps on be technical, and also what many people are now calling human skills, because we have to remember that not all of us come into the workforce with all of the skills that we need. So that is a really good place to highlight those kind of things that may be missing.
Okay. So a great question that a recruiter asks any engineering manager is, are you hiring? But I suppose from your point of view, when do you know to hire? How do you work that? Are there metrics that you would look at in terms of when it is the right time to hire?
I think it's actually so crucial now to even know what those when to hire is, with zero interest rate environment going away. So a lot of what I look at are what are the projects that we are going to be working on, that kind of 6 to 12 months horizon, see what the big bets are that we have been discussing, as either as a team or business wide. Then looking at what our current capacity and capabilities are, and then using that to map back to, okay, what or when are we looking to deliver some of the bigger projects, and how to also keep the lights on at the same time. Those are the kind of things I look at when then trying to decide whether we need more people or the size of team that we need is enough. And also, you then need to build in lead times of once you get that head count, you have to think about onboarding as well. So all of those kind of things come into play to kind of think through, okay, what, so in the end, you just need to think about the big bets, the time horizon that you're looking at, and also the capability of your team.
Okay. Just on that, you mentioned time to hire. What typically you experience as an engineering manager from, right, I need somebody, to going through a recruitment process to then them actually starting?
It's varied from previous roles to current roles. So I remember when I was with Expedia working on the hotels.com side of things, it actually was taking months originally because each engineering manager was recruiting for their team. So someone like me back then, I used to manage teams out in Budapest, and that meant sometimes there's that gap of being able to get somebody in, and I'm traveling and so on, and that got changed internally to recruit more for Expedia. Then if you're good enough to do that, then you can then look at, okay, what team would they fit by talking to each hiring manager. That really reduced the time. That became something where it used to be months, that reduced to roughly something like a few, from first touch to getting somebody in became, of course, if you account for um the time the person has to give notice as well, that drastically reduced from a couple of months to maybe 1.5 months, depending on the level of seniority, obviously. That made a huge difference because also when you go through the interviewing process itself, that got cut down to something like a day. So it's something I've then used as a way to recruit in most of the teams I've recruited for subsequently.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Going from a day, So did they centralize it in essence?
Yes.
And then, so do you have a team that were screening, are they a good engineer?
Correct.
And going that way instead of it being kind of siloed.
Correct. And in my current role now, working for Viator, actually before my time, we're actually doing the same thing in that sense, where it's almost you're recruiting for the engineering function. And then once they've gone through all the stages and they passed, then it's a case of the hiring managers then saying, oh, this person, or depending on our needs or priority, will be good for this particular role.
Right. Okay. So how do you hire a great engineer then? Yemi, what do you look for as a leader?
Wow, that is a really good question. I actually don't go from a technical perspective only.
Okay.
I know, we have to try and think about making sure the person knows how to code, but actually, if you think about recruiting someone who is not a developer but an engineer, I think there's a difference. And the difference that is, I'm looking for someone who is actually curious, who is willing to think, okay, why are we doing this? Could we do this slightly differently? So I'm looking for that curiosity. I'm looking for someone who would, I know it's easy to say, but challenge the status quo, not from the shouty or something, but actually having that understanding of the customer. Okay, who are we doing this for? Why are we doing this right now? Could we do this in a different way? I really appreciate people that were thinking that way, and it makes a huge difference because to the product that you're building, because you could get something out quicker, but something might take slightly longer. But being able to ask those questions, being curious about what we're doing is really important to me when I'm recruiting. I'm looking for someone also who is looking to instead of a know-it-all, someone who is constantly learning. An example of myself, I'm currently, although I'm a senior manager myself, but I'm right now learning data science with Python. Python is a language I've tried in the past, but actually it's now clicking, maybe because of experience now. And I'm also looking to do things like AWS solutions architecture. Not that I do anything with AWS, but I'm also learning along with my team so that I'm able to have those kind of conversations with them where, we are helping push each other to improve. So that continuous learning mindset is a really critical piece outside of the technical.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. I think as a recruiter on the other side of the fence, when we speak to somebody and they come across like they're very inquisitive, it can be really difficult when you're going through maybe more of a corporate process to highlight that to the end decision maker. In your case, Yemi, it can be really difficult, especially when they're going through exercises of have they got .NET or Java and or Python. I would say some of the best engineers are probably more polyglot.
Yes,
because they know how to fix problems and how to communicate it as well. So, it's been a frustration of mine over the years.
I think one of the ways I've overcome that kind of, or you do have your set technical side of things, but one of the ways is actually as a hiring manager myself, making sure I'm prepared. Like, what are the questions I need to have set before I go into that interview? What am I looking for? So if I'm asking this question, what am I trying to reveal of the candidate? That is so important to me, and it's something I actually learned in a previous role as well, where having that time to think about what you want the role to do, therefore asking the right questions of the role, actually means you can say no quicker. I think sometimes people forget that the interviewing process sometimes is a way for you to say no quickly, so that when you find the right person, everything that you are looking for is there.
It's really interesting. So it's important to prepare as well, isn't it, for an interview, as an engineering manager and how you get it organized. Let's talk about diversity, Yemi.
Yes.
Especially in engineering functions and product functions. Engineering can be very male orientated in the UK, and I think there's probably a part that recruiters and hiring managers and internal TA. There's lots of things that we can do to attract a more diverse set of candidates, but why is it important from your point of view, Yemi? And how do you manage that process as well? And I think diversity, we're probably taking in neurodiversity as well, especially within engineering. It's probably more prevalent as well in many regards.
Indeed. So I think is a really important aspect of, at least in software engineering. I think it helps us create better products, because it's people are coming from different angles to what we are doing. And diversity, I know there's been a lot of discussion about it. I don't know if you follow Twitter at all on that. So I think diversity sometimes is reduced to this zero-sum game, which I think is a wrong approach to it. The diversity can enrich the way we see the world. Diversity can enrich the way in which we actually interact with each other, so that we develop really good systems around us. If you think about design, having that diverse viewpoint, and the other thing to think about when we say diversity is not to think of it as some sort of design by committee. It's just making sure we are looking at those edge cases sometimes that wouldn't occur to you if something doesn't impact you. So how do I kind of encourage us to do that? In what I really try to do is working with talent partners and really driving this point home and looking really top of the funnel, like as we go out to market to try and recruit. I think that is that's the right place to be casting our nets really wide, or wider than maybe we do today. And that is where we see a lot of the impacts by going out of our way. It does mean going out of our way sometimes to look outside of where we would normally look.
Yeah, I think so from our side as a recruiter, Yemi, so there's tools we can make sure that we're targeting a more diverse range of people. We can send reports on that. It's also how we put together a job advert as well. And there's, AI is great for this as well. But when we're posting out an advert, we see if it's more masculine, if it's going to make sure that it's more neutral, or even the other way as well, more feminine. Also, just removing bias as well from the supply chain. So we use portals where we can, blind CVs, etc. But it can be frustrating as a recruiter when, you're searching for, let's say, a software engineer around a location, and it is 95% men.
Yes.
And it's just,
unfortunately is the case, but there are other options. And I think it maybe goes to when we talk about productivity and other things in the UK, other options that we can and should consider, but obviously it's a business need sometimes, and all that is, how are we looking, or where are we looking for the next generation of engineers that we want to bring on? So example, boot camps could be one area that we should tap a little bit more into. But when you think about boot camps as well, there is obviously self-selection there, because someone's paid a lot of money to be able to go through that. So it's not that it's wrong, but then there's a self-selection aspect of going through boot camps. We could look at obviously more graduates as people to bring on board and so on. So there are various ways, but in some cases it does need investment, and it's just one of those where someone like myself, I need to be more of an advocate for those opportunities. Something that I worked with our talent team when I was at Thriver was bringing on graduates, and the whole engineering team was actually on board, and it went really well. So that's one option, obviously, is look at the graduate talent pool. We saw some really great candidates when we did that. It was amazing. Unfortunately, we could only take 2. And there was even talk of, could we take 3? Because it was that, the talent pool was that good. But in the end, we thought, we could only support 2.
Yeah, I had a lot of success with school leavers as well. We were asked to find some graduate software engineers a number of years ago. I think there was about 5 in total. And what we found was that a lot of the school leavers at 16 that had actually had industry experience and were programming in the spare time were actually better than the actual graduates with a computer science degree. It seems like 5 years behind the guys and girls that had actually gone out and learned modern programming. I've done loads in the spare time. It was really odd. I felt a bit sorry for the graduates, actually. And I think that their expectations were really high. Anyway, just in terms of diversity of candidates, Yemi, how do you ensure that they're fairly assessed when they go through a process?
I think it does depend. So that's where you think about something like neurodivergent candidates, for example. I think it's really worth thinking about that solidly and making the right accommodations. For example, for some candidates, you really need to make space. Maybe you need to make sure things are quiet. As an example, you maybe need to look at your questions again, like the same questions, but how would you ask them differently? You wouldn't change it, or at least I wouldn't try to change it, but it's like I have to think consciously, okay, would this question make sense in this way that I'm asking it? So those are some of again, goes back to preparation and really understanding the candidate ahead of time, that depending on what you've been told, and preparing yourself for that candidate to make sure you're not using one size fits all for everyone.
Okay. And what does a good process look like for you, Yemi? Is it first stage telephone, virtual, face-to-face, test, final?
All of those things. I think there's a good opportunity to do something like a phone screen, just to make sure that there's alignment on the technical aspect, there's alignment maybe on values or something like that. Just those are really quick ones. And then when we say face-to-face, I do like that, but not in office face-to-face. I think we've moved away from that. Personally,
that way, isn't it?
A virtual face-to-face, I think maybe we should start calling it. It's definitely something. When thinking about the technical side of things, 2 options, or at least I like my teams to think about providing 2 options to candidates. One is to collaborate in a pair programming exercise, and for those, I tend not to be looking too much for the technical. Obviously, I would like them to do well, boys. I'm looking for communication and collaboration if we go with that option. The other is take at home test. What I found from my experiences, take at home test is very challenging if you have other commitments. Although it's an option which I always I give to be provided, but I don't want to limit the pool. Again, it goes back to that diversity thing we were talking about just before. But it's an option that is there if you can take it at home. That's why I have this idea of try to make sure we can do some self-pairing on the day and make sure it's nothing esoteric that we're doing. It has to be based in the reality of our work day to day. And then the hackathon tips similarly. And then when that is brought in, we talk through it and we think about system design depending on the level. And also we look at things like values fit. So I'm not too sure about cultural fit that people used to call it, but more values fit is definitely something that you would.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. Culture versus values, because the culture of a company might genuinely be awful.
It could be. It could be. And also, I think one of the things about values that we also need to be conscious of is some of it is aspirational. We're aspiring to it. It's not that we're there yet. And I think if we're honest about that for ourselves, it helps us when we're gauging our candidates as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we've covered a fair bit there, but let's say you've gone through an interview process. You found your candidates. Now, something that I've noticed in the market is somebody can have an amazing interview process, the land on day one, and the onboarding. They've not spoken to anybody. It's been appalling, and it just creates such a negative impact. And I'm not sure a lot of companies in the new remote reality that we live in and hybrid have really mastered it at all. So have you got any thoughts on that, Yemi, just in terms of what a good onboarding looks like?
Absolutely. Again, some of this is not original thinking on my side, but what some of the things I've seen in the past that's worked well and has worked in my current roles are again intent, and intent is key. Thinking about the person you're hiring is key because they're an individual that needs to come in on day one and have that I think I joined the right company sense when they land, rather than oh dear, everything looks good, but what's going on? So what are the kind of things you can put in place, and that really works? One, think about your team and then the organization. So almost go, okay, what are the things around the organization that they should know on day one, and try not to overload them. Try and spread it out over the coming week or a month, depending on the team they're joining. Think about getting them buddies too. One for the team and one that is more like a organization historian, if you like at company level one, where they can tell you for historical reasons why that is the way it is, or if not that, someone that's just outside their team as well that maybe has been around for a little longer that they can reach out to go, okay, why do we do it this way, kind of thing. That can be useful for them. And then have documentation. Really, like documentation is not a bad thing because you are basically storing historical knowledge and decisions. So make sure you organize those knowledge bases well for new starters. That almost like have a start here page where you can link them to all the different things they may need to know. Understand the Slack channels that they need to join on day one and have them added. And where possible, the ideal is, as a hiring manager, to reach out to them before they start there. Let them know, depending on the company, let them know where they're coming to, whether you're going to be there or not, who's going to be meeting them, all those kind of first day practicalities you need to do. Then for the kind of thinking longer term in terms of onboarding, have a document prepared for example, to say in the first 30 days, these are the expectations that we have for you. And those things make a huge difference. Some other things you can think about doing is have short 5-minute videos, maybe using Loom or similar technology, where you don't need to be with them 24/7. Maybe in the first week you're doing the in-person thing, but then you can point them to, if you want more details, here are all of the different resources that you can then go deep dive into if you need to.
Yeah, I think it's all about setting goals as well when
Yeah.
people come into business. Often they want to impress.
Yes.
They don't know how to. They don't know what good looks like. They don't know how to get to the next level. I think that's across the board. So
yeah. So, for example, with my team, we're doing something like literally we just had a workshop on this topic because I only just joined Vital, and we are in the process of beginning to work. We have something already, but we're making some changes. We want to deepen what we're doing around onboarding, and it's been really cool to see everybody wanting to collaborate on that.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Right, so we've defined what we wanted. We've got a diverse team, and they've been onboarded amazingly. So now we're at process. So I suppose process is a little bit. It covers a bit of culture as well.
Yes.
So what process have you put in place, Yemi, to have a engaged engineering team in the past?
Yeah. So the first thing is trying to find a process that fits the team, because each team is different and made up of individuals. And the key around any kind of process you are trying to put in is one, the minimum possible so that they can get on with the work they need to do. You want to build something where the team themselves can actually drive improvements to it. So it's not you dictating, you're working with the team to make sure it's the right fit. And you're also working to and with the process that creates trust in the team so that they can make the change that is needed without necessarily being told to make that change, because they can see it themselves. So what does that look like? So for me, I tend to work with teams on starting with things like workshops to just walk through, okay, what's number one, what's our team identity, what are we here to do, what are the team operating system, how do we want to communicate with one another, and all of that then drives things like do we use things like Scrum, do we use things like Kanban, whatever that looks like depending on the nature of what we're doing, and then helps us to think through our stakeholders and how we communicate out our regular work. So those are the way I approach process: minimum as possible, but not totally none, and open to change so that we can continue to improve what we're doing.
Okay, how do you keep those line of communications open to kind of build trust and transparency with your team? Do you do that on one-to-ones, or you try and create a culture where everybody can chip in, sharing ideas and concerns?
Yes, it's a combination of one-to-ones is one way to build relationship directly, and then you do need the team level things as well. So you think about things like retrospectives. You also yourself, someone like myself, being open to questions and not shutting questions down and showing that either in a public forum or in an individual forum. I think that's really key for people to see that you are essentially a good listener, and you're not just coming things with your own
listening, which is actually quite hard in this day.
Very hard, because whatever anybody says, we come with a bias, but a good leader is all around. Okay, can you pack that the bias and the ego for a little bit so that you can hear the other person and then work with them and to really arrive at either answers, solutions, or just understanding where they're coming from. So team meetings is one where you also need to make sure when you're in that team scenario that you are giving space for everyone. It's easier said than done, but you really have to make a conscious effort to give space to people to actually say what they're going on. And there are other cases where you might make things anonymous, where maybe you do surveys and so on. So depending on what you're trying to get at.
Cool. Another thing to cover off in it, obviously, as a recruiter, I'm speaking to a lot of people where they're kind of facing a more uncertain climates have either obviously been made redundant, or maybe the team members have gone. So just a question about leading, through change. I mean, how do you navigate organisational changes and keep your team motivated as well through uncertain times?
Yeah, I have been through this myself. So it's a challenge because you're not sure what's going to happen next. sometimes.
Hmm.
So as a leader, I think the most important thing I have done is try to be as transparent as you can be based on the information that you have. Transparency doesn't necessarily mean telling you everything by the chapter, but is being able to explain how a decision was arrived at if you do know. That's
Yeah.
one. Second is communicate again on based on your knowledge of the situation, and then help people because they will go through highs and lows, and be really understanding of where they might be in that change curve, and being there to support them, but also being very clear though that, well, depending on what you know, obviously, like, we do need to come out the other side and be able to drive whatever that next phase looks like. So really be empathetic to how people are feeling, communicate with them, be transparent with them.
Okay. Cool. Right. So we've got great people, we've got a good process, and everybody's motivated as an engineering function. Now, looking at delivery from an engineering manager point of view, I suppose this is almost about protecting your team in a way and dealing with stakeholders that are maybe non-tech in essence. So, what's your kind of best approach in terms of stakeholder management and working with other departments and looking after and influencing, I suppose, the delivery roadmap as well, instead of maybe things being dumped upon you? And that's a big question, I know, but
I'm not sure I'll be able to answer everything, but I'm gonna start. I think in my role as a more senior manager it goes back to that communication piece. There are some things I would know ahead of time because I mean, meetings that my immediate people may not be in. So it's how do I make sure they're aware that something's coming in the horizon? How do we organize ourselves in such a way that we can look into some of these things as part of our delivery process? So it's not coming too late. If there's some investigations or anything we need to do ahead of time, can we carve out time to make sure we're ahead or just about, right there, and not having to spin our wheels when the time comes, because that does impact delivery. And then the biggest thing I think is for me is actually empowering the team themselves and really helping them to work where possible across teams, to ask the right questions, to chase up on people, and obviously escalate to someone like myself if something is really blocking them. But actually I drive for teams taking ownership of what they're doing. We may be there to help with unblocking, escalating, sometimes prioritizing as well. So how do I empower my team is always my first question when it comes to delivery, because ultimately they will do the work. Where I can come in is I do have technical background and technical knowledge. I may be able to ask questions of the team that they may or may not have thought of, or I may know something because I've been exposed to a meeting or something else where I can help them level up on certain areas. So drive for the team to really be empowered to make decisions, to also communicate outwards is where I tend to be, but making sure I'm providing that information, that communication, that transparency to the team.
No, that's brilliant. We have covered a lot there, Yemi. I'm going to ask you some bonus questions, though. I'm in a good mood today. No, obviously, we described your experience. I think you've given some great answers today. I think it's been really informative. But what advice would you give to any aspiring, maybe lead engineers that want to become an engineering manager? Is it right for everyone? What do you think is the core of becoming an engineer? Is it just to get away from code? Are you tired? Or do you think there needs to be a bit of an ethos there about becoming an engineering manager?
I think there are two. One of the great things compared to what I was doing maybe 12, 15 years ago, honestly, I couldn't see a different path than you're an IC, then you become a manager. That was the path. Obviously, that's changed a lot since then, where There's really good IC route, and there's now really good engineering manager route, or let's say management route.
Yeah.
I would step back and ask myself questions around, if I want to go down the management route, why am I doing this? Would I be happy to leave the reins to others, to basically for me to deliver through others? Because that's the key here. As you become an engineering manager and you go more the management route, you really are having to deliver through others. If you are a perfectionist, or there's something where you still feel like you need to jump in, you really need to think carefully whether that's the right route for you, because we really have two good routes now, where you're an individual contributor, can get to staff engineer. You are going down the management route, you can go to CTO level, or whatever that may look like for your company. So step back and think, why am I doing this? And then second question, do I like people? You can
I
you
shouldn't be
cannot do
recruited,
this role
Yemi.
if you don't like people. That to me, it's actually the fundamental to everything that we've discussed here. You need to want to work with people. You need to want to see people grow to go down this route. And it's very challenging. You see first-time managers where they still want to be on the IC part, but at the same time do a little bit of the management route. You can't have it both ways. I know there are companies currently preaching, 20% time of an engineering manager is in that they need to use to code. And personally, I'm actually not against managers who want to code. I think it's their right if they want to, but you still need to come to it as your fundamental role is, how do I develop my people to have autonomy, to have mastery, to grow in the way that the company needs? And also, if it's not, they can do it here, how can I help them to get to that next level elsewhere? It's a question that you really do need to ask yourself. So people is fundamental. And you if you step back and look at almost any project that fails, is it the technology that really failed? It tends to be people, because either we don't listen to each other, we haven't grown the person to get to the next level, and so on. It's people fundamentally that we deal with.
No, that's brilliant. I think what I've seen a lot of techies, like really ingenious technical people that have gone into management. I've often felt it's because they just didn't want to be managed. So they thought they'd become the manager. And it's not really fundamentally maybe wired in the way to be an engineering manager and maybe bringing people together. Just
you find that some really good engineering managers may not be the most technically gifted. But they have that combination of empathy for people and the technical chops as well. They may just not be the Einstein of the technical world, but they know enough. But they know that to achieve anything, they can rally the troops and get them high performing, which is where you always want to be, because you want them to be able to master what they're doing.
Cool. Right, last bonus question then, Yemi, because we've covered off loads today. What do you think the future is of software engineering right now? There's obviously loads of hype about AI. I ask it on every podcast, but do you think it's going to affect massively engineers in the future, or do you think the role of an engineer becomes more of a business logic type, process-driven person? What do you think?
I think it will affect engineering in the future. The question in my mind has always been when. When when will that curve of adoption of all things AI, in terms of how does it come into play? So today we know we have things like Copilot that can help us do our work a little bit better. I'm on the optimistic side, but I might be wrong on this, that it won't replace engineers. Actually, one of the things I always argue, but again, I might be wrong, is that in the end, who creates the AI? It's human beings. So why do we think somehow we wouldn't need them? We may need less of them, but on the flip side, we may actually need more of them, if you think about it. So I am optimistic in the sense that actually it will help us to be more productive. I don't think, at least right now, in the short to medium term, I don't think software engineers are going away, but maybe it will help us to create higher quality in our code. If you think about what's happening on the Horizon post office thing, could they have helped us to do slightly better with that? Maybe, maybe not. But I think those are where we really need to be thoughtful about leveraging AI. We need to be thoughtful about where in the workflow it will help us, where in the workflow actually it doesn't make sense for us to add AI into. But I'm an optimist that it will be helpful rather than completely get rid of us.
Yeah, but it goes against diversity as well, doesn't it? If you've got loads of AI engineers.
Yeah.
You'd have to build a diverse AI bot. Yeah, anyway. Yemi, I think that's been amazing. Thank you so much. I think that's been really, really great. Yeah, I think there's loads to take away from today. So thanks everyone for listening. So it's Brio Bites. It's going to be out on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and notifications buttons for some of the new podcasts that we'll be doing. We're going to be covering a lot in tech for good, more within software engineering leadership and security. We started to work with some global companies now looking at security problems across the world. So that should be really, really interesting. But thanks again, Yemi. That's been amazing.
Thank you, Rob.